We actually got breaking news a moment ago. Israel and Hezbollah have now agreed to renew their ceasefire after the fighting obviously postponed the Iran-U.S. talks in Switzerland. That's according to 3 officials. Given that, Mark, you think J.D. Vance, you think these meetings could be back on? This thing is fluid.
Yeah, I mean, the meetings could be back on. I'm not sure how something like this would last. I mean, you always have to take any kind of ceasefire, especially in the Middle East, with a big grain of salt. And look, I think, again, like I said before, I mean, I think this is J.D. Vance's problem, and I think it's a sort of a week-to-week problem with him. I mean, I think it's a classic sort of outsourced to the vice president, something you don't want to deal with. But I also think that, look, I mean, in the Middle East, I mean, you have, if this does go to Congress and there are these ongoing debates about the price of how much the Pentagon needs and trillions of dollars and so forth, that is not just a dicey political issue. It's a terrible political issue for the Republicans to be having going into the midterms.
Well, you just gave us how the pro-Israel right is taking this. What about that? Pro-Israel right is certainly different from the classic MAGA base. What do they say about the deal?
Yeah, I mean, these people kind of style themselves as America first. People like, let's say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, people like Tucker Carlson. I do think a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure neither of them are pro-Israel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think at this point, I think a lot of the Trump base just wants to move on. I think a lot of these people didn't want the war in the first place, and they're obviously much more focused on things like the price of gas. Conversely, I think, as we've been talking about here, the question is whether Trump really can move on and how much he has to throw Israel under the bus, how much of a sort of separate peace he has to make with Iran in order to do that ahead of the midterms.
But, are we buying this? You know what? We didn't like it. Let's just move on. Is that going to work out for President Trump politically? Are we just going to forget the enormous amount of money and effort and everything that happened with this? We can say, this is behind us, we're moving on, and Republicans are going to say, okay, glad you wrapped that up, Will?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad blood, including in the Republican Party, over this war. I think people saw this, voters more broadly saw this as very unpopular, as sort of forever war that Trump had promised to avoid. And so this is a very classic Trump move to say, well, I did it and it was incredible and let's never talk about it again. But I don't think that's going to work.
We have an audience question. Someone asking, it appears to me that Trump totally capitulated to Iran to end hostilities in hopes that it would help Republicans in the midterms. And to say, we heard from Iran's new supreme leader who basically said Trump took the deal because he was out of options. Given that, Jake, how does all this look for Trump? Nobody's better, or he thinks nobody's better at spinning things than he is. How can he spin things when this is the reality?
To be frank, it doesn't really matter how it is for Trump. He's not up for re-election. It's the 200, 275 or 260 House and Senate Republicans, however many it is, that are up for re-election in 100 and something days, as you said at the top of the show. And they're saddled with a president with 30-something% approval ratings, who is at war in the Middle East with gas prices, although gas prices are falling. But the driving force here, Steph, clearly was the Strait of Hormuz, right? I mean, Trump said that that the world would go into a global economic shock if the Strait of Hormuz continued to be closed. Now, but if you pair spending however many billions they've spent on munitions and on the war in the Middle East, and you say, okay, well, they also didn't spend anything to renew healthcare subsidies. They didn't do anything on issue X, Y, and Z. Then that's a tough message for Republicans. It just is. I mean, they're banking their entire political viability in what's historically a bad midterm cycle for them on one bill that extended tax rates for people. That's the crux of it. I mean, they passed a bill that kept all tax rates the same, and they're saying that is the winning message for us in what's going to be a difficult midterm. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it doesn't seem terribly compelling to me, but what do I know? I mean, I guess they have a better theory of the case than I do. And they say, well, Democrats would have raised your taxes. Okay, so that's their message. That's the bed that they've made going into the midterms. We'll see how that works.
Or it's a completely unmade bed, because, yes, Trump's right. If the strait remained closed, it would have catastrophic long-term global economic impact, which we all knew was the case when and if he launched this war. So now they're going to reopen it. And what did the war get him if we end up in a worse position than we were 5 months ago?